Good morning, good afternoon, greetings from London. I'm glad to be here today presenting to the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario. Thank you for the invitation, and very especially I want to thank Beth Potter, the President and CEO, for all her support to WTTC and for her leadership. Let me tell you a little bit about WTTC. Not sure if I had the chance to share this before with you all. These four CEOs had an interesting meeting with the former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger. This was 30 years ago. They had a meeting and they went to see him with different agendas. As you can understand, two CEOs from airlines, one hotel, and one American Express, a financial company, where basically their agendas were not aligned. And the secretary told them, listen, guys, you have to leave and come back with one agenda. It's very complicated for me as a government to work with you when you are not aligned. So these four individuals, they left. And 30 years ago, as I say, they created WTTC. WTTC is the voice of the global private sector. Currently, a little bit over 200 CEOs from around the world are our members. We represent all the industries from airlines, airports, cruises, hotels, travel companies, all of them. 30% of our members are in Europe, 30% in Asia, 30% in America, and 10% in the rest of the world. Currently, our chair is Chris Naceta. He's the CEO for Hilton Worldwide. Vice Chair for North America is Arnold Donald from Carnival Corporation. And I'm sure that here you see some faces that they are very familiar within the industry. Deborah, for instance, is one of our members. She's from the Toronto Airport. Robin Ingle, another Canadian. And a lot of these companies, they do a lot of business in your country. So very happy to be here today, as I say. And these CEOs help us to define the strategy for the global private sector. Last year, we also started inviting SMEs and associations, and that's what Beth is also one of our members as well. We not only speak with one voice, we have done research for 30 years, and that's how we know the economic impact of travel and tourism. Based on the data from last year that you see right here, travel and tourism contributed 10% of the global GDP. We quantify direct, indirect, and induced because we need to use the same methodology in 185 countries around the world. If you see the chart in the bottom, you will see that the gray line is the economy. The economy has been growing quite nice in the last 9 years, but the green line is the GDP for travel and tourism, which has outpaced the growth of the economy, as you can see there, for 9 consecutive years. And then when you look at all the jobs created in the world, in all the sectors, in all the industries, 1 out of 4 have been in travel and tourism. 1 out of 4, which speaks about the potential. Currently, it's 330 million jobs, 1 in 10. Now, let me tell you about Canada. And our numbers might not match the local numbers. I want to just disclose that very quick, because some countries, they measure direct, some countries measure direct and indirect. And as I say before, we quantify the total impact. So based on our numbers and our data, the contribution of travel and tourism in Canada is 6.3%. What's interesting is the growth, the GDP growth that we had in 2019, it was 2.7%, which is a very important number and very interesting. And here you have more data in terms of the visitors, the international impact, and all of that. Now, this has been an unprecedented situation, as we know, an unprecedented crisis, and for sure has been an unprecedented impact. We work with Oxford Economics to try to quantify the impact of COVID. And it started with 50 million jobs back in May. Then it went up to 100. As of September, it was 121 million jobs impacted. And unfortunately, it seems that by the end of the year, we'll have reached the worst case scenario, which is 197 million jobs lost. 197 million jobs. That's devastating. That's a lot. And that's $5.5 trillion lost. Now, in the case of Canada, our numbers, according to our numbers, is 1.6 million jobs lost or at risk by the end of the year because of the lack of international visitors and also, of course, the impact of domestic. So by far, this is the worst crisis ever. Now, besides research and economic impact and jobs, in WTTC, we also look at the past situations and the past crises. And we look at 90 different situations through the last almost 20 years. And last November, we published a report where it exactly talked about that and exactly highlighted these 90 different situations, and we grouped them in 4. from natural disasters, outbreaks related to security issues, or political instability. And based on the impact on travel and tourism, we also look at some findings and some learnings. So let me highlight 3 lessons learned from the past that have helped WTTC, our members, and our sector to understand the path for recovery. The first one is 9/11. 9/11, without questions, has been a huge impact for our sector, but it was a very painful recovery. Why was that? Because of the lack of coordination. We didn't have a good coordination, public and private, and we didn't have a good coordination among countries. Every country, for instance, came up with their own security protocol, to the point that almost 19 years later, before COVID, you were traveling around the world, the airports had different screening, and it was sometimes the plastic bag for the liquids, different sizes. Some of the countries were asking to remove shoes, some of the phones, not a standard. Now, 19 years later, it's still a challenge, and we have come a long way. But at the very beginning, it took us a long time to recover and rebuild the trust from the traveler. So we need to make sure that we don't go through that painful recovery again. The second lesson learned is 2008 financial crisis. That was a very interesting case because we recovered pretty fast. It was an 18 months recovery. And why was that? That's when the G20 platform that Canada is part of, that G20, by the way, was escalated from only the ministers of finance to heads of the state. And we had an excellent coordination, public and private, and also among the countries. And that allows to recover pretty fast. So it is very clear that when we work together, we recover faster. That is the lesson learned. And the third lesson learned is the outbreaks. We have had some really bad outbreaks in the past, like SARS, MERS, and Ebola, to name some of those. And we were able to travel without a vaccine. Why was that? Because we were able to isolate the people infected. So we believe that in this case, we can do the same. The only challenge is that COVID, between 50 and 80% are asymptomatic, and that's a big problem. So we need to figure out how can we isolate infected people. Now, let me share with you these graphs because they are very interesting and very important. Please look at the top left. The top left, you will see that's the world, the last 20 years. The white line is the economy of the world. The green one is travel and tourism. The blue bars are jobs. Now, when you look at the green, and that's the impact on travel and tourism, you will see there are 2 big incidents. One is 9/11 that I mentioned before, and the other one is the financial crisis. Just look at the recovery. One was a U shape and the other one was a V shape. Why is the difference? As I said before, because the coordination, that we didn't work together, unfortunately, 9/11, we were learning, we didn't know what to do. It was a big challenge, totally unexpected, pretty sad situation, right? But the countries defined their own security protocols, for instance, and many countries didn't follow the same protocols, they implemented their own. But look at the financial crisis. We recovered pretty fast because we worked together. Now look at the top right of the graphics. In the top right, you will see that's the G20. What happens in the G20 exactly reflects on the world. So if we can get the G20 to work together, then the rest of the world will follow. That's why this platform, the G20, is very important, because to get 100 or 180 countries to be aligned and work together is quite of a challenge. But to get 20 countries to work together is easier. Well, not easier as we think, but it's better. And if we can get them aligned, we can make faster progress and recovery. Now look at the bottom chart, please. In the case of the bottom chart, if we go back, please, you will see China. China had an outbreak in 2003. They were able to recover pretty fast. That was a V shape. And the V shape, why was that? Despite that we didn't have a vaccine for SARS. Even today, we don't have a vaccine for SARS. Basically, the message there is that you can recover pretty fast from an outbreak if we work together, if we implement the right measures. And we should learn from that case, because now many countries are experiencing or will be experiencing that V shape as China did in 2003. Now, based on all these lessons learned, WTTC came up with 4 principles. And we have been talking about these 4 principles perhaps since April or May. And at the beginning, we had a lot of pushback and people thinking that we were not realistic, that this was not the case. But little by little, we have been able to convince some people and align the entire sector. Let me elaborate on the 4 principles. The first one is that we need to have a coordinated international approach to establish an effective operations. That means that when we reopen borders, It has to be in coordination with the other countries, with the private and public sector, so that we can understand what measures are in place and we can do that in the most effective way. When we decided to reopen borders, we need to make sure that we remove barriers, because what is the benefit of reopening borders and then, for instance, imposing quarantines? Quarantines are the same thing as saying you are not welcome to my country. So we believe that there has to be a good understanding. For instance, an air corridors might be an option between destinations and countries that they are aligned between medical, political, and tourism. But we need to work together on these best solutions. But it's very important to use testing instead of quarantines and contact tracing. There's a lot of evidence and a lot of data. Perhaps 4 months ago, we didn't have that much, but now there's a lot of knowledge and information of how some countries have been more successful than others reopening. Second point here is that we need to look at the seamless traveler experience. We have talked for years about this seamless traveler journey as well. It has been one of our priorities. We have come a long way in asking to implement technologies such as biometrics. Canada has been ahead of the game compared to other nations with the biometric passport and implementation of biometrics. What we're only asking is to include the health component to that experience. And we believe that there are two phases: before the vaccine and after the vaccine. Once the vaccine is available and widely spread, you might need to have a recognition or a stamp or something that say that you have received the stamp, the vaccine. And that stamp or that information should go in your PNR or should go in your reservation in an electronic way. Now, before the vaccine, we need to do testing. And that's the only way that we believe we can isolate infected people with the lessons learned that I just mentioned before. So we need to do testing before departure and hopefully only allow the negatives to board the plane, plus wearing the mask, plus the protocols that would allow us to have a safer return of international travel. Very important to differentiate. Third is the adoption of global health protocols. We need to learn from 9/11. And that's why we at WTTC have done a lot of work with the protocols, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And the last one is that we need to continue having the support from the governments. So far, a lot of governments have been very supportive, including the Canadian government, and we appreciate that. But we need to understand that not all the industries and the sectors have been impacted the same. Some have been hit worse than others. Our sector have been hit the most. So we need to make sure that the support is the same level than the impact. And that's what we see in Europe and what we see in Asia and many countries around the world, so that the governments can have a very specific support for travel and tourism, and they can help us to continue protecting workers with physical benefits or any kind of liquidity for us to survive and weather the storm while we try to recover. So these are the 4 principles for the recovery. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the protocols. Why the protocols are so important? Because we don't want to make the same mistake that we made in 9/11 with different protocols around the world that will take us longer to rebuild the confidence from the traveler. That's why we at WTTC and our members decided to create and define some protocols. So let me give you one example. The hotels, for instance, our hotels like Hilton, Marriott, Radisson, Accor, Four Seasons, you name it, Hyatt, all of them offer rooms for free to doctors and nurses at the peak of the outbreak in Europe or in New York. And those rooms that we offer to nurses and doctors that they were taking care of patients with COVID, we were able to maintain those installations COVID-free. And that knowledge was included in the protocols with the knowledge and the expertise from WHO, from CDC, and a lot of medical experts. All the knowledge that our members share with the different programs went to the hospitality protocols. And those are the protocols that we share for hospitality that are free for you to learn and use in our website. Then after that, of course, we define the protocols for outdoor shopping. We define protocols with ICAO card, for instance, for aviation and for airlines and airports, because ICAO card, as you know, those are the guidelines for aviation. We define protocols for tour operators, for MICE, for short-term rentals, car rentals, all of those with the goal to offer the same experience so that we can rebuild that trust from the traveler faster. That is the end game. We want to offer exactly the same experience in London, Toronto, Madrid, or Mexico, whatever is the case, so that the consumer will feel comfortable and will know that we are taking care of that experience. Now, our protocols have been endorsed by UNWTO, of course, and by a lot of countries around the world. And what we're doing also sharing our protocols with associations like the tourism industry associations that we have granted the protocol so that they can share to their members as long as they can guarantee that they have the protocols at the same level than the global private sector. So this is not a certification, it's just only a recognition that is given to destinations or to our members or to the private sector that has implemented the protocols at the same level than the global private sector. So far, we have more than 100 destinations around the world who have received the stamp, because let me tell you, we created a stamp for the safe travels because we were thinking how our travelers are going to identify who has the protocols. And at the beginning, we thought the stamp for us, for the private sector. But the reality is that the countries started asking us for this stamp, which is interesting, right? Countries such as Saudi Arabia or Portugal or Turkey or Egypt. And as I say before, more than 110 destinations from around the world so far have received this recognition. And we have almost 100 still in the pipeline that we want to review only their protocols to make sure that they are at the same level. So if you can help us to promote the safe travel, basically, as you are the expert in this case, and now more than ever, your knowledge and your expertise is very valuable for the traveler, or it will be very valuable during the recovery, make sure that you recommend hotels that they have this safe travel stamp, because you know that they have implemented the best protocols, for instance, that at the level of the global private sector, or the tour operators, or whatever is the case, car rentals, or whatever it is that you're offering during the experience. So this is a way for most of the consumer to say it is okay to travel and the protocols are the same, as I said before, so that we don't have the same experience than 9/11. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what we are doing in terms of the recovery and what else we have done. We believe that we have a unique opportunity to overcome the challenge. WTTC has been engaged with more than 150 governments from around the world. We wrote to the G7+3, including the Prime Minister of Canada, to ask for his help and their support to work together, because before the G20 meeting, we were targeting, of course, the G7 plus Australia, Spain, and South Korea to work together. Timing is crucial because a lot of people have lost their jobs. And in many countries, they don't have the packages or stimulus that we have from some governments. We believe that we share priorities. We don't want to export or import the virus. That is very clear. We want to also reduce of the impact of millions of livelihoods around the world, that people, they don't have any food on their table. They don't have any money to pay for the care for their children, or they have been impacted, unfortunately. We want to avoid this long recovery, and we want to make decisions based in data, based in science, that they can help us to coexist with this virus until we have a solution. So there is an opportunity here to reduce the social impact, because it's not only this health crisis has become an economic crisis, it's also a social crisis that we have seen, for instance, issues with security, increase of inequality, and a lot of women, for instance, have been impacted because 54% of our sector were women, and of course, a lot of youth, because 30% are young. So I believe that we share these priorities with the governments, and we just have to find a way to work together. So if we move to the next, what you will see here is that what we have been doing. During October 7, it was an unprecedented opportunity because we have the G20 Tourism Minister, and we know that millions of jobs and livelihoods have been impacted. Saudi Arabia has the presidency of the G20, and under the leadership of Saudi Arabia, the Minister of Tourism of Saudi Arabia, Ahmed Al-Khatib, requested WTTC and the private sector to put together a plan to recover the sector, because we are living an unprecedented time. He asked us to build a plan to try to figure out how can we bring back in a shorter time frame 100 million jobs that you are very familiar, from tour operators, housekeeping, pilots, flight attendants, cruises, travel agents. A lot of jobs around the world have been impacted. So we put together this plan, And basically, we presented this plan during the G20 that it happened in October 7th. And also, for the first time ever, he created a session in the G20, perhaps you're familiar, that you have a technical session and then you have a session with the ministers. And this year, for the unique and the first time ever, we made history because there was a technical session, then there was a session with leaders of the private sector, 45 CEOs from around the world, and then they had the session of the ministers. And during the private sector session, we were able to present this plan. This plan has 12 commitments from the private sector. The plan is available in our website, and I'll share some details in a minute. But basically, it has 12 commitments from the private sector, and it has 12 things that we're asking the governments, because we cannot do this alone. It is very clear that the private sector can recover, but if we have the support from the governments, we can recover faster. And some of the highlights or the most important points is that we need to have this coordinated approach to reopen borders. If countries are reopening borders in silos, it's not going to be very effective. We need to implement an international testing protocol so that we do testing before departure. Right now, a lot of countries are doing testing on arrival, but that's a little bit too late because they already imported the virus. We need to do testing on departure so that only the negative cases can board the plane. And of course, we need to modify these quarantines to only have quarantines for people that tested positive. So that's basically what we presented this week. The plan, and on October 7th was very welcome. Here you have, as I say, the commitments from the private sector. We work with everyone, with a lot of associations, international organizations, leaders from the private sector to create these 12 points. And these 12 points are, as I say, related to our 4 points that I mentioned before for the path for recovery. What they included, from instance, from testing and contact tracing to flexibility on bookings, that if you tested positive of COVID, you have the flexibility to change your flight ticket or your hotel reservation, to reinforce, for instance, the travel insurance, because we want to make sure that that exists. And we have been working with our members, by the way, because there was not a travel insurance that included COVID. Now there is one. To sustainable practices, that we believe that the agenda for sustainability has been accelerated, the digital agenda, several others. I'm not going to go over the details of this plan. You're more than welcome to visit our website, download the plan, and hopefully help us to execute. As I said before, we also requested the governments some points, and these are the public sector recommendations. That it starts with international coordination, the coordinated approach that I just mentioned, the implementation of air corridors. Perhaps we can have an air corridor between Toronto and London, where we do testing before departure, and we have also wearing the mask and some protocols in place that would allow us to have that business corridor or travel corridor, or London, New York, for instance, just to trial to see how the model works. But we need to have international travel to be resumed in order to recover these jobs. That's at the center of the plan. We need to make sure that international travel is resumed. And it is possible. We have done this in the past. We just need to do it right so that we can continue protecting lives. And at the same time, we can make sure that the demographic groups, or the groups that are more vulnerable, we keep them in a bubble. And for instance, perhaps the millennials, the Generation Z and the Generation X, they can start traveling, and we can see how this goes. And once we have a lot of data and a lot of evidence, and this works quite well, then we will think about including other groups, but not before or until we have a vaccine. So that is the situation. And as you see here, it says align the health and hygiene protocols to standardize. That's the other thing that we're asking the countries. In some countries, wearing a mask is not important. In some countries, wearing a mask is relevant. We believe that we should follow science, and we should follow wearing a mask, and we should follow the protocols, because we can take control of this virus if we work together and we do it right. So these are the 12 points that we recommended to the G20 countries. All the countries welcome, of course, our plan, and they offered to work with us. Some countries even offered to lead the way. And I know that many countries are already on the works of some of these initiatives already. We have heard from Italy, we have heard from Spain, from Germany, Australia, and many others. So we'll move to the next, please. At the end of the day, I wanted to share also something else that it was included in the G20. I believe that last year when I was with you, I presented this strategic framework. That is the framework that our members define as the top priorities for WTTC. These were the three things that were keeping up at night our CEOs and the global leaders, from security travel facilitation to crisis like the one that we're suffering right now to sustainable growth. In the case of crisis preparedness, we are very clear that we were not prepared for this crisis, despite all the analysis, research, and work, and trying to convey the message of the importance for crisis preparedness. But we need to learn the lesson and make sure that this doesn't happen again. And we will continue to invest in crisis, especially learning from the past, currently managing the crisis, but preparing for the future. Now, on the left side, you will see security and travel facilitation. For 3 years, WTTC has been talking and advocating in favor of seamless travel journey. How do we use technology? How to use biometrics so that we can be more efficient, more touchless, so that would help our sector. And of course, sustainable growth is another one that we have been pushing, which has to do with climate and environment, the future of work, and social impact and social responsibility. So in the next slide, what I wanted to highlight is some good news and wonderful news, actually, that after 2 years working with G20, in this specifically G20 for travel and tourism, Seamless was included, which is wonderful news. Safe and seamless travel journey was included in the declaration, is included in the commitments, which is wonderful, because that would help us to increase security. It will help us to be more touchless, but it would also help us in the recovery. This is great news, and a lot of technology will be implemented and will help us to accelerate the digital agenda. OECD contributed a lot, and of course, WTTC has been working on this for years. So we are very happy that the Saudi took this as a flag, and they took it to the next level and worked with the tourism groups of all the G20 countries to make it happen and made a commitment. We are so happy also that, as I say, this was a great impact for the G20. Next, I would like also to cover another point that is very important for us that has to do with sustainable growth. Sustainable growth has to do with the future of travel. We issue a report the day of international tourism that you can download as well that talks about the future of our sector. Climate and environment continues to be top priority for us. We even have a board position, a vice chair for sustainability. We had a climate event this year. Last year, we have our first global climate summit, and we will continue to push the agenda because this is an area that we believe that the agenda has been accelerated and we need to continue working with this. Digital agenda, of course, another one that we will continue pushing, and the social impact and responsibility. Social impact, very important part of our agenda. It's not enough to measure the economic impact, the jobs created, but the social impact that our sector has. Every time that someone travels makes a positive impact. Every time that we sell travel, we transform lives, we impact people, and we change the world. That's why we announced a campaign called The Social Impact that I would like you to please share, and more important, ask the people that travel has changed their lives to share their stories, so that at the right time, people can feel good about travel, because every time that they travel in the past, they made a positive impact, either feeding a family, or providing money for education for girls, or providing money for infrastructure, or helping a country to reduce poverty or reduce inequality. A lot of benefits with social impact, and of course, social responsibility. Every time that you travel also impacted and reduce illegal wildlife trade, and so many benefits that sometimes we're not that vocal, that I think we need to have a voice and continue to speak about that. And how do we engage with communities is also very important, because the communities are part of the solution. Travel and tourism is part of the solution, we believe, but we need to be included in the plans. It's not only the public and the private sector. We always say it's the public, private sector, and the communities. So we move next. I wanted to close with sharing a video. I don't know if this is gonna run well, but I think this is very important for our campaign. Hopefully you like it, and thanks again for the invitation.
What does travel mean to you? Exploring the world? Creating memories? Meeting new people? Disconnecting from it all? But what about making a difference? Because our travels mean so much more than we realize. And those memories we've created together in travel, they're even better than we thought. Remember that restaurant where you'd never felt so full? Know that when you paid your bill, you helped feed your waiter's family of 4. And that time you stared open-mouthed at that incredible dance. You maintained jobs that keep important cultures and traditions alive. Travel is not just life-changing. Travel is world-changing too. That photo you took on safari, the one that hit new levels of likes, your trip supported the tireless fight against the illegal wildlife trade. Remember that spontaneous city break? It helped maintain schools in the local area. And your tour guide, the one who made you laugh so much, she is one of millions of women employed in a sector leading in gender equality. Remember how you made a difference when you traveled? Remember how much your travels meant to others. Now, just think of all the good you can do in the future. Travel the world. Make a world of difference.
Hope you like the video. As I say, the social impact is very important. We need to start talking about that. The job that you do matters. Every time that you sell travel or every time that someone travels makes a big difference, and we change the world. I want to thanks again. Thank Beth, and thank you for having me today. You have there the email from Elena Bononi from my team. She's based in America. So if you need to contact someone from us, she's in the same time zone. If not, you can contact us here in London. I appreciate the partnership, and please count on WTTC for this recovery. We'll come back stronger and better. Thank you.